I like to think about that like for life, right? That alligator over there is not going to mess with you right now. It's too far away. I'm going to shoot the one right here and then keep moving. We'll keep moving down the river. And so that's kind of how I like to look at life, is like, we'll just move in steps and what we can control and then just keep cruising along. I think just because you get onto that cycle, I know many guys that was how they would sleep, because when you're on deployment, we can get Ambien to help you to sleep, and that's even worse.
What are some of the things people could say or steps they can take?
I think you just have to be direct. You cannot beat around the bush, because when you do that, then all of a sudden you're kind of worried about really your feelings.
Episode 91, Stay Classy Podcast. Here we go. Today is a very special episode. We have the honor of a longtime Navy SEAL with us today, Robert Garnett, who is also a managing director, and he's the director of all surf operations at One More Wave. One More Wave is a nonprofit that is dedicated to raising awareness and combating the issue of veteran suicide through surf therapy. And we're going to get into a little bit about that. But first of all, Rob, I just wanted to say, like, for people who don't know about Rob and his background, as we were talking before the podcast started rolling, you have 23 years of serving as a Navy SEAL. Is that correct? And you got out in 2015?
That's right. Yeah, I retired in 2015 from here in San Diego.
Here in San Diego. Okay. And you were deployed multiple times, including Afghanistan. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
And so now you work with One More Wave. And you saw combat, you came back, you obviously learned through surf therapy, how to deal with a lot of the issues that veterans face. But then it didn't just stop there for you. You actually decided to help impart this to other people, help other people who were going through what you had gone through. And now your organization is all about healing. It's about restoration. It's about bringing peace to troubled lives. And you're making a difference, and you're not just improving lives, you're actually saving lives. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But first of all, before we go to the big picture and talk about One More Wave, I just want to know, how was surf therapy specifically uniquely impactful to you? Because there's obviously so many different kinds of therapy and counseling out there, but surf therapy, especially for veterans, and we talked about in last week's episode with Jordan Ryan O'Hara, but there's something different about what it does for people, what it does to people's psyche, and specifically for veterans. So talk about how that was impactful for you.
No, for sure. No, thanks. But I think it's tough to think of a time that you went to the ocean, or you went to the beach and you had a bad day.
Yeah.
It's tough to have a bad day when you're on the ocean, you're having some community, some friends, walking down the beach, letting the water splash on your feet. It's tough to beat that feeling that you get of just peace in the ocean. And so for me, surfing, what it does, and I think what it allows us to do, is let your brain take a break. Because when you get in the ocean, I tell people all the time, the ocean doesn't care. Yeah. It doesn't care if you're having a bad day or a good day. If you're not focused and paying attention to what you're doing, the ocean is going to slap you around.
Yeah.
It's sometimes going to knock you down anyways. But if you're not paying attention, you're not focused, you're going to have a lot harder time. So I think what's healing about surfing and being in the ocean, and really anything that you have to have a lot of focus, is that it lets you be present right now. You have to pay attention to what's going on. You want to pay attention to what's under the water. You want to stay on your board. You want to watch the waves. You want to watch the other people in the ocean. And so allowing yourself to focus on just that allows you to kind of take a break from worrying about all the other things that maybe you're thinking about.
Yeah.
When you think about depression is you worrying about things that happened before. Anxiety, you're worried about things that are going to happen. All those things exit your brain when you're like, I must focus on the ocean, that wave. Yeah. And if I want to ride the wave, that joy you're going to experience when you get on and get to just slide down the wave and really just let everything else go and just see what you can find at the end of the wave. Yeah.
Well, and I was talking to when I was talking to Jordan on the podcast last week, he talked about the whole idea of, when you're with a buddy, when somebody who's a member of One More Wave is with another veteran and they're about to go into the water, how they kind of the thing they say is, like one more wave, and the guy goes, yeah, one more wave, and but the idea is sort of bigger than just even surfing that particular wave, but it's about, sort of explain that. So what is One More Wave? What's the phrase about before I go and try to explain it myself? What is the meaning behind the name?
It's kind of a joke. When you're out surfing and you're in what we call the lineup, which is where everyone's kind of waiting for waves to come in.
Yeah.
You'll catch a great wave and then it's time to go to work, or maybe you have to go do some other stuff and you go, okay, I'll just go get one more. And then you paddle back out. And you always are telling your friends, hey, let's just get one more.
Yeah.
And really what you mean is I want to get another good one. So I'm going to keep waiting. And so sometimes you end up staying a bit longer than you planned. But really it's just, hey, let's just do one more wave. Let's do that one more thing instead of maybe something else unhealthy.
Yeah.
Or let's go surf instead of checking out. A lot of people get really down in the dumps. maybe we can go find something healthier to do, another step, another thing, another friend to kind of shame you into getting into the water.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there was an article I was reading before this, before we got going today, that had you in it. Actually, was talking a little bit about the organization, and there was a particular Marine, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was sharing his experience with One More Wave, and he was saying, and I believe the man had actually lost one of his limbs. I think it was his leg during combat, but he was sharing about how One More Wave and surf therapy had been healing for him, both physically and mentally. And he said, and I put this out on my notes today, he said, "Nobody is staring at me out there, at the guy with the missing leg. When I'm on the wave, there's no more pain." And I take that to mean physical pain. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of benefits that the ocean and like being in the water can offer, but I also take that, you know, on the mental side with what he went through, and with you know, the what a lot of combat veterans go through and coming back. So talk about that. Talk about how, you know, like I've seen numerous accounts online from people who've said that you personally have changed their lives, or changed their husband's lives or their son's lives. You know, I've been looking at these stories. I just want to know, like, what is about surfing, but specifically the way you guys do it and your approach behind it, that's changing people's lives. Like, how does that happen?
Well, if you think about it, like when you get together with your friends and you're going to go shoot hoops or play some pool or shoot darts or do some other game or sports thing, it's not just the activity, right? It's the thing that we love to do, especially guys, is talk a little trash, talk some shit, make fun of each other, and then encourage each other, and then go do that thing. And so when people leave the service or first responders or, you know, another impactful job, they feel kind of lost, right? You kind of lose that purpose. And so when you come to a group that is kind of similar thinking to you, you get to come in, you get to relax, and then all of a sudden people are holding you accountable, which is what we really want. We don't really talk about that, but we'd like to be held accountable. And by that, I mean, like, it's really easy to not go surfing because it's a little bit cold, or your wetsuit's still wet, or you don't have the right board, or any number of reasons. But all it takes is for Steve to come, "Hey, Rob, let's go." I heard all that. Let's go surfing. And you're like, "Damn, okay, let's go." And so that community we crave, right? And we love all that other stuff, talking a little trash, making fun of your friend. If they do something silly, like put their wetsuit on backwards, you should laugh at them because it's funny. And so those are all the things that mean. And so as an amputee or somebody with a severe physical injury, they spend a lot of time with people coming up and going, "Hey, I'm really sorry what happened." When really what they'd like is for you to treat them like everybody else and be like, "Hey, let's go." One of my favorite stories, a dear friend of mine, his name's Jose. He's a triple amputee. He surfs with us all the time. We can talk about it later, but he's a Paralympic athlete for parasurfing for Team USA. We're hopping down the beach, and so we're going to get in the water. And so often when people come and they want to volunteer with One More Wave, they imagine that they'll be carrying wounded veterans into the water, like a chain of people carrying people in the water. And most adults, men and female, don't want that. They'd rather be treated just like everybody else. They need help, they'll ask. But me and another guy and Jose are walking out to the water. And as we walk, there's a big dip. And me and the other guy just step and kind of drop down. Well, he disappears. Goes underneath. And the first thing he does, he's only got one arm, he comes up and he's flipping us off. He's like, "Hey, where the fuck are you guys on that?" So what he will tell you is that he loves to get in the ocean because when he's in the water, he's just like everybody else. You know, he's just out there surfing, he's trying to catch a wave. He might get thrashed, he might have a great time, but he's just in a group and back in society where no one is pointing out something that he's missing.
Surfing becomes like an equalizer. For sure. In a way. It's like very egalitarian in nature. Like, it doesn't matter like what happened to you before, your circumstances, rich, poor, like you're out on the wave like everyone else.
That's right.
So I love that. But I was thinking, like, too, with what you said about like sort of this, you know, the desire to be treated like equally and, you know, as other people are in regular life. But that's kind of like a difficult line, I feel like, for non-military people to walk, right? Because, you know, there's obviously, and there should be, a lot of respect for military service, and for especially people who, you know, maybe lost limbs or lost brothers and sisters in combat. Like, there's a lot of respect there. But I think sometimes what you're saying is that that's good, but there also needs to be like that sort of like, "Hey, I'm just like you guys." Like, so like that, there's a kind of that balance between like respect and also like, "Hey, I just want to be like you." Like, that's
right. And it is hard because if you haven't experienced it, it's different than you know, when all your friends have one leg and peg legs and they joke about sockets and stuff. Like, I'd never experienced that. So it's definitely a different world to get thrown into. For sure.
So, I mean, like, you talked about Jose, so we could talk about him more, but like, what are just some specific stories that you could share? And, you know, feel free to use names names or not use names as you choose to, but about how this organization has made a difference in like someone's life. Like, you kind of talked about a few different people with the para athletes, but
Sure.
So we could talk about that, but just like maybe a couple stories about people that you've like personally touched.
No, for sure. I think what we forget a lot is, luckily there's only the people we serve. So we've done probably 750 boards, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe 10% or less are people with severe physical injuries like that. The majority of the other folks that need assistance, that need some help, that need that community are people with the non-visible wounds, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, depression, anxiety, addiction. And so all those folks will still come. They're still available to all of our services. They'll come get gear. And so the people that get impacted incredibly are when people are just having a tough time.
Yeah.
Right. And so now they get to do something like some art therapy. Maybe they get to go work on building a board, and it's incredibly impactful. Maybe they lost somebody and they get to put some friends' names on a surfboard, or they just get to come and surf. They get to check out from their other stuff that's going on. And what's amazing is, to me, it's very impactful to me, is when like a husband or a wife will be like, hey, Steve's been a total dick for like 6 months. Mm-hmm. And then he started surfing with you guys. He's great. He's sleeping all night. He's not drinking. He smiles sometimes. I never used to see Steve smile. So thank you. So those things like will keep me going for a whole year. Just one statement like that from a spouse or a loved one or a friend, parent. It's amazing. So those scenarios are fantastic. What we also do is try to help people with VA claims. There's many people that have had a bad time with the VA, especially if you're a minority, you're black or brown. There's still a lot of real and perceived racism that happens. And so people don't want to go to the VA. So we have people that come to our meetups, and we'll help people right there on the beach. And so we actually just helped a guy probably 3 months ago because his daughter had come and she was serving with us. Her dad had served in Vietnam, had never done a VA claim. So when he came back, everyone's, it was a tough time for everybody.
It was a tough time for the vets were treated really poorly.
Right.
After
And
Vietnam.
he came in, we helped him out. They're getting him back paid from like 1973 or something crazy. So it's incredible. Those little stories where you can help people's like daily life are amazing. Competing's cool. Surfboards are awesome, but I'd much rather people come and enjoy each other, come surf, bang into each other, break the boards. We'll make new ones. The community piece is what's key, and it keeps me going.
Hey San Diego, looking for the perfect spot to sip on award-winning craft beer, hard tea, and cocktail-inspired drinks? Look no further than the Embolden Beer Company Tasting Room right here in Miramar. Whether you're into bold, hop-forward IPAs, crisp lagers, or refreshing hard teas, we've got it all. Embolden brings you innovative beverages brewed with passion for that next-level taste experience. Come by with friends, grab a flight, and relax in our laid-back, dog-friendly tasting room. Plus, we've got food trucks daily to keep you fueled while you explore our rotating tap list. So why wait? Visit us at the Embolden Beer Company Tasting Room located in the heart of Miramar, where craft beer and beyond beer lovers unite. For more info, check out emboldenbeer.com. See you soon for great drinks and good vibes. For sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I know that the VA has had some dysfunction for a long time. And now that you mentioned, because I didn't know about the issue of discrimination with, towards minorities who have served. Mm-hmm. But now that you mention it, actually, I do have a friend who has served who actually also is a minority. He's had a lot of trouble getting his VA benefits for his disability. So what you said checks out. But also, I'm just wondering, in terms of just attitudes towards the VA and sort of this feeling its benefits aren't kicking in and people are getting discouraged. How do you kind of push back against that? What's it like working with people who probably already have a preconceived negative view of how government works and that they're actually going to get any help? I
think it's just kind of sharing my own experience. And we really have a good relationship with the VA. They come to our events. San Diego is pretty good for us. So we get a lot of feedback that things have worked well. Mm-hmm. When people get that hands-on kind of personalized service, I think it helps a lot. So that's a big thing for us for One More Wave. So anytime when someone applies for gear through us, they fill out the paperwork. I interview every single person. So everyone that ever applies, I talk to them and I share with them my stories. We talk about kind of struggles I've had and how surfing has helped me. And then we go through the whole process. And so we try to connect them with people that can help them with their VA claims in the same way so that they can feel like, hey, I know I had a crappy time at first when I went in there, a couple things didn't work out the way I wanted, whether it was me or them. So now I've got this personal relationship with a friend that Rob kind of turned me on to. And now I feel comfortable to kind of work through the process. And it's never easy. No one wants to do paperwork. It's not fun.
No.
But having someone that you feel like is an advocate and then being able to talk to other people that have been successful getting help has really been a turning point for a lot of folks here.
Yeah, no, and I mean, what I love is about you guys is like you do two things, right? You sort of meet the more intangible need of, you know, mental health advocacy and, you know, through surf therapy, but you're also meeting a very tangible need by connecting them with like literal benefits, like through the VA. So I love that kind of balance because I think, you know, some philanthropic organizations, maybe they kind of do one or they do the other. And it's like, okay, you know, we're serving meals to the homeless, but like, let's also connect these people with long-term, you know, resources, like, you know, get them out of the situation, or maybe you kind of just do the other and ignore the tangible needs. So I like that you guys have that focus on both. Now I'm wondering, like, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about you.
Sure.
Like, you know, you served in the SEALs for 23 years, you know, known as probably definitely the toughest military unit in American history is the reputation, possibly in all military history. But like for you personally, I want to ask you, like, what were some of the most important, like, and applicable today, like, still, like, life principles that you took away from your time in the SEALs? Like, what did you learn about, you know, life, like human nature? It could be through the training and just the mentality you took to become a SEAL, or it could be something on the deployments. Like, what were some of those principles that stood out to you over the years?
Goal setting, for sure, was one of the big ones. I mean, when you think about when you're talking about SEAL training, it's long, right? So it's a very long pipeline. And so if you're worried about things that are a year from now, you're probably not going to be successful. So when you start training for SEAL training, you really learn that, hey, I'm just worried about the next thing that's coming up. How do you eat an elephant? You know, one bite at a time. So I think focusing on what is right now and what's the next thing can be incredibly helpful, especially for long things. You know, we can say it's a marathon, but that's kind of hard to conceptualize. But for us, one of the big things for us, we compile it into like Hell Week. Hell Week's a portion of BUDS that lasts for a week. You don't get much sleep, and it's lots of running. It's lots of activities. You're up for a long time. But what you realize is that they have to feed you. And so you go, I can make it to the next meal. It's breakfast. This sucks. It's cold. I'm tired. My friend just quit, but I know I can make it to lunch. And then you get to lunch and you're like, okay, I'm at lunch. I can eat. Woo! I get to sit down for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start doing it. And then you get out and you're like, okay, all I got to do is make it till dinner.
Yeah.
And so I think that really has helped me in life to be like, okay, what's the next thing? I can make it to the next thing and keep going. And so I talk to people that are, you know, I've had friends that have had like suicidal ideations. I'm like, hey, let's not worry about 10 years from now. Let's worry about tomorrow. You know, what we need to do to keep you here today. Let's keep chatting. Let's have a plan for right now and not worry about super far down the line. You know, one of my favorite things is, you know, you're cruising down the Nile and there's a bunch of alligators and there's one up on the bank and there's one right next to the boat. Like, which one do you shoot first? You shoot the closest alligator to the boat. And so that's how I like to think about that, like for life, right? That alligator over there is not going to mess with you right now. It's too far away. I'm going to shoot the one right here and then keep moving. We'll keep moving down the river. And so that's kind of how I like to look at life, is like, we'll just move in steps and what we can control and then just keep cruising along.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say, like, I think like sometimes people struggle with that because it's good to have like big picture, like mentality and goals. And then it's also important to have the details down. I think like the struggle, like personally for me, like I've always been somebody who struggles with the little things, but I'm good with the goal setting and like the big picture stuff. But sometimes it is just about that day-to-day stuff, like, and especially with suicidal ideation, especially with depression. And I've shared many times on this podcast my own battle with depression, but like there's an element to which it just needs to be like, hey, what's the immediate need? And like, let's go from there. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So I love what you said there, but I'm curious, like in terms of the mentality that it took you to become a SEAL and the mentality that it takes to be a SEAL. As I shared before, you know, I have a couple friends who, you know, have been SEAls. I have a particular friend who retired, I would say about 10 years ago he's a much older friend than me, but he retired about 10 years ago from the SEAls. And his experience, I remember just even when I was a lot younger than him, but he went through the first time in Hell Week and he started vomiting his own blood at one point. So he got pulled out for a medical evaluation, and then they let him go back and eventually finish. I have another friend who just completed BUDS training, so he did Hell Week earlier this year. So what I'm wondering, like it seems like the experience, what I learned from those two gentlemen is like, it's almost like you sort of have to be ready to die, like going into Hell Week and going into this training. Like you have to want it so much that you're actually willing to die and like to look that death in the face. Like, would you say that characterization is like accurate, or what was it like the mentality that it took going into SEAL training, and then also like that same mentality going into the situations that you faced as a SEAL?
No, for sure. I think people definitely think like that. This I don't know if it still happens, but when I went through BUD/S, we're getting ready to start. And so when you're in the Navy, you have a certain uniform. When you're in like special operations, you get to start wearing camouflage. Like nobody wore camouflage in the Navy back in the day. That was strictly very small number of people. So like you knew like once you were done with this, you're going to switch this other uniform. And so we'd have these like barbecues to get ready to go. And we burned our uniforms. We're like, I'm not going back. I'm going to have to like buy a whole new set of uniforms because I just burned all of them. Like I can only go forward. And so I think what was helpful for me was you just set up and like, that's it. We're going forward. Yeah. It's funny you talk about, I'm just going to die. I remember towards the end, the very last day of Hell Week, we were running back from somewhere. I'm sure it wasn't very far, but in my mind, we were running back from, Guadalajara or something, back to Coronado. And as we're running, we have the boats on our head and I'm in so much pain that I'm like, if I'm going to die, if we don't stop, I'm just going to fall over dead. And I remember thinking like, okay, I guess that's the thing that's going to be. And we ended up finishing, and that was the end of Hell Week. But I remember the very last hour being like, well, I guess I don't know if I can do this much further. I don't know if I can keep moving. And I was like, I guess that's it. I guess this is where we're going to finish around the sand in Coronado. And luckily we finished. But I do remember having that thought of like, I guess that's what we're going to do. Yeah. But I have had many, many friends go, I just figured I would, die trying. But I think you just have to really make it the most important thing to you to be successful. And I'm sure that's how it is for most things.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like every SEAL like has like their own different like kind of motivation for that gets them to that point of like, I am ready to risk death to make this work to achieve this goal? Or do you feel like there's kind of a common, like a shared set of goals or a couple of goals that would come to mind in terms of motivating someone to look death in the face like that?
I think both. I think also, you get really tight with these folks. Yeah. You don't want to let them down. Yeah. And mostly you don't want to be last. Right. So you want to be in the middle or up front. And so you don't want to let everyone else down, but mostly you don't want to be in the back. Yeah. You don't want to be the last person. You get extra attention. And so that fuels a lot. It sounds silly, but that's very real. Like I don't look at those guys. They're getting thrashed back there. Yeah. I'm pointing behind me. You can't see, but it's really just to be part of this group. And then you become best friends with these guys. Right. Yeah. So the way I describe the SEAL teams is everyone did some type of sports or a club or something, and you got to go on a trip. And your favorite part as a kid was like, we're going to go on the bus. We're going to be gone all day. We're going to get lunch. We're going to hang out. And we're just going to be there. And we're going to do this thing the whole time. And then you get back. Well, that's how I felt like on the SEAL teams, except you get to do it forever. You're traveling, going on these trips, going to do these great adventures with your best friends all the time. And so when you're done, it can be jarring for sure. Yeah. And so I think that's what a lot of people experience when they transition. It doesn't have to be out of SEAL teams, out of the service, that you're like, whoa, what happened? I was on this cool team. We were doing all this stuff, and now I'm not.
Enjoying this episode? Subscribe for more content on finding your own path to success. Every subscriber makes a huge difference to the pod, and we're grateful for everyone. And don't forget to throw us a classy like and comment too to let YouTube know that you're a fan of our stuff. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcasting.
I'm curious, like, and I'm going to move towards the topic of mental health and PTSD in a minute, but because I think that deserves some attention. But I am curious about it seems like the last 10 years or so, roughly, there's been a number of former Navy SEALs, David Goggins, Jocko Willink, is that how you say his last name? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if there's a couple others. The gentleman who claims to have killed Osama bin Laden, I can't remember, I think it was Eric. But anyways, he wrote a book. But a number of former Navy SEALs who have sort of adopted almost, whether they intended to or not, have almost become like celebrity folklore in like American society. Sure. And it seems like the SEALs that I've heard from have sort of mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, it's like, these guys are doing some seemingly great work. They're like pushing people to be their best selves. They're encouraging people to get out of bed in the morning, make their bed, like all the great principles that make someone successful, strong, and focused. On the other hand, there seems to be this sense I get from some SEALs, in just the interviews I've seen, and also from talking to friends like that. Well, these guys they're kind of sort of breaking the code, or they're not really, like, SEALs aren't really supposed to talk about this kind of stuff. They're not supposed to open up in that way. Like, do you kind of see both sides of it, or where do you like kind of stand on these, like, sort of the Navy SEAL becoming this like mythical like celebrity in American culture, I guess? It's
tough, right? Because we're supposed to be silent warriors, silent professionals. Yeah. So it is tough to, to see the rise of all that stuff. I mean, right after very famous, raids, there's books out already. So that is challenging for sure, because you want to be able to still be that person. You want to be able to blend in society. So it's very challenging for sure. Yeah. But also, I mean, those people served also. They deserve to do whatever they want. I mean, they earned their right to be SEALs, whether you like them or not, whether you like what they're doing or not. Sure. So it just depends. I think they both have benefits.
Yeah.
You know, that brings a lot more attention. Like when I came in, there was I couldn't even Google how to become a Navy SEAL. Nobody knew how to do it. The recruiters didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
You just kind of get in and kind of figure it out. Now you can find all kinds of information out there. There's tons of books that the Navy actually produces documents about how to train and get ready. So I think all that is good. And all of that, frankly, has come from all the stuff that people don't like, which is a lot of bad publicity.
Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about like, sort of the mentality, and this will kind of transition to our next topic, like the mentality that we just described that it took to become a SEAL that you talked about. And again, it's different depending on the person, but kind of that overall mentality of like, you know, I'm willing to fight for this goal, even if it means like risking my life.
Sure.
How does that mentality, in your opinion, transition to life after service? Like both good and bad. Like what are the sides of that?
No, it's challenging. You're used to really charging hard at stuff all the time, and that doesn't work for a lot of things outside of the military. So I think being able to kind of throttle back on that is definitely a challenge. And then maybe not being the best at what you're doing. You know, you're new to whatever you're doing, unless you hop right out of the military and you're in some type of a government contracting thing where you're doing very similar to what you're doing. I think it's incredibly challenging to now move into other positions where you're not doing that. You're not hunting bad guys or bad girls, whatever it is.
Sure.
I think that takes a minute to figure out. It took me at least 5 years to feel normal after retiring.
Yeah. And when you say to feel normal was that like career wise or in other ways as well?
Oh, no. I mean, like that you realize, and I think this is adults too, but like it's okay to go do something just for fun, not just, you know, for work or for something else, but like something just for you. For me, it's surfing. Maybe you play pickleball, whatever it is, you know, to go do something just for you and not feel guilty about it. It's really hard, especially as parents. You're like, oh, I should be taking care of, you know, Evan's homework or school or something else. So I think those things, it takes a while to like, you know, off ramp yourself from, hey, I'm just here, I'm at home, and then I'm trying to meet up and connect with my family, and then I'm going to go right back to getting ready to train and go over to overseas again. So that cycle is hard. It doesn't matter if you're in special operations or not. I think if you're on a ship or on a plane or in a Marine Corps infantry battalion, all those different things, you get into this cycle of going, coming back, and switching from, you know, how Steve acts on deployment and how Steve acts at home is challenging for sure.
Yeah. Well, with that said, I want to talk about that a bit. So we've talked about this a couple episodes now in the last like couple of months, but there's kind of this sense that the way that we look as a society at veterans, at PTSD, the issue of veteran suicide has evolved a lot over time since, I would say, roughly since around World War II or so. You know, as I said last episode, you know, my grandfather served as a Marine Corps major in World War II. But that generation, there was sort of the sense that you don't really talk about these things. You do not talk about the war, or at least from what I've been told, a lot of these people didn't, perhaps because it was too painful, or perhaps there was a code of silence around it. There's a variety of factors, right? But sort of the language and the way we think about this has evolved over time. Now it seems like it's more acceptable to talk about issues of PTSD, to talk about trauma from combat, to talk about these experiences. Yet, while the language has changed, while we're more open about it as a society, like, let's be real, like the problem has gotten worse by far. Like, you know, I believe at least 20 veterans commit suicide a day is the information out there, which is worse than we were at 20 or 30 years ago. You know, I believe it's worse now today than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. But I guess what I'm asking you is like, what are your thoughts on the way that the language and the thinking has evolved around veterans being able to share experiences from combat, you know, be open about PTSD, be open about suicidal ideation, all of these different things that are harder for people who haven't served to understand, how the language has changed, but the problem like still seems to be like getting worse. Like, what are your thoughts about whether the way we've evolved as a society in that regard is a good thing, bad thing? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it's gotten worse. I think we just haven't known about it. I think it's been the same the whole time. I think it's always been traumatic. You know, we went to Vietnam, you know, Korea, all those places. People would come back with trauma. It's just no one talked about it. And you certainly didn't talk about it while you're in the service, because if you did, then you were kind of weak and you weren't going to be trusted. And then let alone if you're on medication now, what do we do with you? Can you still do your job? So that has changed dramatically. I notice it, and I shouldn't say dramatically across the service. I know that there's much more availed of everybody. In SOF, it's much more, I shouldn't say accepted, but known that there's lots of trauma that happens with combat, especially when you go to combat for 20 years. That's not something that we had done as a nation for a long time, right? People deploying over and over and over again for a whole career. People go to war for a year, maybe even 2 years, which is insane, and then come back and they're kind of able to kind of move back into society. Whereas if you were in SOF, you're doing these 3, 6, 9-month deployments over and over and over again, which is incredibly traumatic. But I think now people realize, hey, you got an off ramp. One of the things that wrecks us is sleep, right? So when you get into these cycles, you're on caffeine, you're doing stuff at night, so you're not awake during the day, so your rhythm's off. This trauma will keep you from sleeping, and then you're hooked on caffeine, and you're just in this cycle. And then when you're home, you mix that with booze, no sleeping, caffeine, and just not sleeping over and over and over again. It's just ripe for people to get into accidents, get into trouble, domestic violence, substance abuse, all of it just kind of goes crazy.
Yeah. So I was interesting you mentioned the issue of sleep, which has profound health impacts that I don't think we're even fully aware of as a society yet. But the reason that I want to focus on sleep for a minute is because I always thought, like, when people talk about, like, you come back from like a tour, say, and you're having trouble with sleep, and I have military friends who have, I thought of it in terms of like the PTSD and like the nightmares and stuff, sort of keeping people from sleeping. But what you're sharing is that actually that may be the case, but it's also like the actual rhythms that you have while you're on deployment actually can still screw with your sleep when you get back home, like because you were doing night duty, or because you were doing a mission at night, or because you were like hooked on caffeine. Like those same like patterns, like those actual patterns carry over. Like, so it's both a mental thing, but it's also a very physical thing that you've like learned.
It is, and it's caffeine, nicotine, and then what happens now too, though, people go out on day raids, night raids, and then they come back, and what used to happen back in the day is we'd kind of sit around a campfire, all chat about the day. Hey, that was crazy. I can't believe that. That doesn't happen. You come back, everyone's got their own little place they go to, and there's an Xbox in there. And now they crank on the Xbox for 5 or 6 hours, and now they're completely, sleep rhythm is destroyed. And now the next day we do it again and again and again. And so instead of that sharing and all that kind of good camaraderie that we get, and it's really, if you think about what group therapy is, that's what you're doing. We're sitting around, we're all kind of talking, we're all kind of sharing, and we're all, that worked for so-and-so, that's going to work for me. Oh, all those things are very helpful. That doesn't really happen anymore on the battlefield for anybody. Yeah. Everyone comes back, there might be some type of a small debrief, but then everyone just goes to their own room and kind of is in their own funk, kind of hanging out. And I think that is incredibly difficult, because then you don't get to share, you don't get to talk about it, and you get to express how you felt, how scared you were, how happy you were, whatever it was, how crazy, whatever it was that happened. When you don't get to do those things, it just gets stuck inside you, and it kind of just leads to trauma later. Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, like, with the sleep and I'm curious, have you like studied or have you seen like any research about like, 'cause I know that I've like seen news articles about it and stuff, but the sleep's effect on mood, on, anger management, on issues that you talked about, substance abuse, just on overall physical and mental health. But have you sort of like seen like studies or research on this, or have you kind of like have you sort of taken education that you've learned yourself and sort of applied that in the way that you interact with other veterans?
No, for sure. Because for me, I didn't know that I had sleep apnea. I'm 150 pounds, 170 pounds with sleep apnea. So it doesn't usually happen to really skinny, fit people. It has nothing to do with that. I couldn't sleep at night. I had sleep apnea. I had restless leg. I would rip holes in sheets, and all that was from anxiety, from traumatic brain injury, from PTSD, all those kind of things. And until I got all those kind of figured out, it was terrible. I would pace at my house just like an animal. Like I had too much adrenaline, because you go into, imagine when you get in a car accident, right? Your adrenaline jacks up and you're ready to do stuff. But when you're going and you're on deployment and you're going on operations and somebody shoots at you, that goes up, right? And then you go down, and you get into this cycle of adrenaline. Well, what happens if you do that too many times, if you do that too often, it's just, you're in fifth gear all the time and you can't downshift anymore, and you get stuck in this high. That's what people talk about, not being able to sit still or being extra alert. That's just because your fight or flight has just said, fuck it, we're going to fight all the time. And so that crushes your body. You can't sleep. You have anxiety all the time. And so until you can break that, it's really challenging to get back to, old Rob.
Yeah.
Can I just add some anecdotal evidence to that? Look, I wasn't even a trigger puller. I was on an aircraft carrier. But it's being in that environment where it's 24/7, and it could be you're on the flight line dodging planes as they land, or it's not that much different. And it really it wrecks your sleep. I didn't get enough sleep in boot camp. I got pneumonia, and they basically gave me some Tylenol and let me sleep for a day, and I was like I was healthy and wonderful again, and I could go back and do what I had to do. You never get enough sleep. You're always on some weird watch rotation, or let's put you on mid shift from 10 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning. When you're on a ship, you're working 12 hours a day, and then what do you do when you're done with work? It's not like you go home or you talk to your friend. You got nowhere to go. You can watch the same movie that you've seen 50 times already on the closed circuit TV, or you can go, back to your rack, your shoebox, and try and go to sleep with an airport 10 feet over your head. The sleep is so important, and I completely agree with Rob that it leads to that cycle of alcohol and caffeine and anger, and then you're deployed all the time, which makes it almost impossible to have meaningful relationships, and then that messes with you. It's a rough life.
Yeah, so let's talk about some specifics here. So let's touch on substance abuse, for instance. So substance abuse, I can't quote any official information about substance abuse correlation, with veterans coming back from tours or anything, but perhaps you've seen that information, or perhaps you can just share about why substance abuse tends to be acute amongst veterans returning from combat, or even not necessarily even from, as Rob was talking about, the trigger pullers, but just in general, people who are returning from the military struggling with substance abuse, and how that then carries over into other areas of life.
I think just because you get onto that cycle, I know many, many guys that was how they would sleep. Right?
Yeah.
Because when you're on deployment, we can get Ambien to help you to sleep, and that's even worse.
Okay.
You get wrecked.
What's an Ambien? I don't know.
Sleeping pill. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But because you get on these off cycles to where you do night ops only, right? So during the day you're up. So you're missing the sun. We had tanning beds to get in so your body can get some vitamin D. But the sleep thing just destroys you. And so what it does is it makes people become, addicted to alcohol. They get home after work, and the way they can calm down from all those things I was talking about, that anxiety, that pacing, that inability to kind of shift from fight or flight.
Yeah.
And so the alcohol, is that depressant that can kind of even you out and then let you sleep a little bit. Of course, you get horrible sleep when you're drinking.
Sure.
You're dehydrating yourself. It's terrible for your brain, but you think it's good. And so I think that's really an easy way for a lot of us to kind of get stuck into that cycle of caffeine, booze, no sleep, just surviving.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, as far as, a couple things. One is when you, because when you were in Afghanistan, where else were you deployed?
Iraq also.
Mm-hmm. And both of you were, obviously you guys served at different times. Both of you were deployed in general during these 21st century wars that America's been involved in over in that area in the Near East. And I'm curious, what your take is. We've had a couple other veterans now share their experiences on this podcast. I'm not asking you to have all the answers here, but as far as, I guess you don't even have to comment on what you think about the wars, right or wrong, but just as far as the sort of sense of, I get the sense, and Rob and I've talked about this personally, there's sort of a glorification of war in our movies, in our culture, of combat, of people think it's this cool, exciting thing, and that there's clear good and bad guys, and it's there's no moral gray area. Different veterans will have different takes on that, but in your experience, from what you saw, from what you experienced, what was your sort of impression of war before and after, and what do you take away from that now?
I think it's always stranger than you think. It's very surreal, right? The first thing you think about, for me, when I thought about the first time I ever had bullets coming at me, I was just angry. I can't believe someone else is shooting at me.
Yeah.
But of course they're shooting at me. I'm in their house at night, and I just knocked the door down with an explosive. Why wouldn't they shoot at me?
Yeah.
So learning that to have some empathy for other people there was strange, right? Because we're not used to that. Of course, we're good, they're bad. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys, and it's never that simple. But so it definitely changed my kind of outlook on just when we're going there to do something. What are we trying to do? Who are we trying to help? Us, I think for special operations, it's easy because we have a very defined job. We're going to go find people and bring them back.
Yeah.
I think it would be much harder if they're okay, you guys go take that entire city and then you're going to sit on that block for 12 hours. I think that's much harder to kind of rectify in your brain. What are we doing here? Why are we sitting here? Why are we getting hurt to protect this area? So I think it really depends on the focus and the purpose of whatever you're doing there. So for me, I wouldn't say it was easy, but at least I knew what we were doing. I'm hey, we're going to go get bad guys.
Yeah, defined purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not guarding a building or a gate or a fence or later on we started training local folks, but we didn't have to do a lot of that. So it was much easier, I think, for us to define like why we're there. But I could definitely see why, if you're there to drive the trucks back and forth and all you do is get blown up every time you drive from Baghdad to Fallujah, you'd have a pretty skewed or different idea about it than I would.
Let me ask one more question on this, and feel free to answer this as you will. But did the convictions that you had that pushed you to become a SEAL, that pushed you to want to serve, that just the convictions you have as a human being, were those ever like challenged? Can you talk about a time or maybe a series of times where those were really challenged in a way that you never thought was possible?
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't say it's easy. It's different when you get to fight other adult men. When there's kids involved, it's horrific. One of the worst things that I remember seeing was being in Baghdad in the Green Zone. The Green Zone was like a little secure area where the embassies were. I went out in town to go grab something. I can't remember what it was. We're probably going to go on a trip, and I needed something. And a woman she was a suicide bomber and blew herself up. Well, she did it when everyone's been to like Mexico or Tijuana, and you see all the kids with the little the chiclets. Yeah. All those kids were around her when she did it, and she cranked herself off. And I have this distinct memory of like little shoes hitting people. And so I was like, man, that's like this memory I had for a long time was just these little shoes that were flying around. And it was because she had detonated herself around these other people. So it was really impactful for me to be like, man, this is real, so real. And you're so close to seeing things like that. And so it's very shocking. I think we're not really put together to see things like that. So it can take a long time for you to process and be like, whoa, I don't even know what my brain is seeing right now.
Hey San Diego, looking for the perfect spot to sip on award-winning craft beer, hard tea, and cocktail-inspired drinks? Look no further than the Embolden Beer Company Tasting Room, right here in Miramar. Whether you're into bold, hop-forward IPAs, crisp lagers, or refreshing hard teas, we've got it all. Embolden brings you innovative beverages brewed with passion for that next-level taste experience. Come by with friends, grab a flight, and relax in our laid-back, dog-friendly tasting room. Plus, we've got food trucks daily to keep you fueled while you explore our rotating tap list. So why wait? Visit us at the Embolden Beer Company Tasting Room, located in the heart of Miramar, where craft beer and beyond beer lovers unite. For more info, check out emboldenbeer.com. See you soon for great drinks and good vibes.
Yeah. So I wanted to also ask, like, in terms of, do you feel like in order to perform a special operation, and I don't want to gloss over what you just said, this is going to tie back to the similar issue, but do you feel like to do a special operation or to serve, to engage in combat, that there has to be a certain level of, venom that you have towards the enemy? Or are you kind of like, do you feel like SEALs and service members that are engaged in combat can do a good job of disassociating and being like, okay, like this is my job, but outside of this, like I don't necessarily hate these people, but like this is just like what I'm doing for work, and I have my reasons for doing that. But outside of that, like it doesn't affect the way I view
My experience was almost 95% of the people, it didn't matter where they worked, were like, hey, we're separating it. This is what we're doing right here. Everyone else here is not a bad guy. Like the whole country of Afghanistan is not bad. There's certain people that are for sure, but I felt like most people could differentiate. I'm sure that if you have a bad time, if you just saw your friend get injured or hurt or killed, then yes, you're going to have some venom towards the people that did that. But in general, I didn't find that to be the case around anybody, U.S. or non-U.S., that everyone felt this venom towards an entire country. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah. So my next question is just like you shared that experience of the story of the extremely traumatic experience with the suicide bomber, and did experiences like that over time start to, like, after you got out of service, having seen those things, like did that alter some of those beliefs that you had about the war or war in general, or why you had joined, or not?
No, not really. I mean, I'm ridiculous. Like I joined not because I'd always dreamed of being a Navy SEAL. I joined because I needed to pay off some student debt. So like I didn't come in and then be changed by it. I knew when I was coming in, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, this sounds great. I'd been a commercial diver for a minute, and I came in to be a Navy diver, and that happened to be closed. And the recruiters told me that I could go diving and experience some other stuff at Buds. And so that's what led me to go be a SEAL. I had a path that led me like that, and I kind of went in and got so. Going to war definitely affects you. It changes the way you look at the world, but it didn't really change why I came in, if that's what you're asking. I still loved my job. I still was patriotic. I was still angry like everybody else when the U.S. gets attacked. Nobody likes that. So no, it didn't change. It just, kind of altered just my understanding of the world outside of the U.S. for sure.
So I also wanted to say, like, as far as like your you suffered numerous injuries in combat. I believe you suffered some head injuries and some other injuries as well. Obviously, those take a physical and mental toll. So talk about how you worked through that a bit. And like, I feel like I've been asking a lot of negative questions. So sort of the positive spin on that is like sort of also how you worked through it, how you found the ability to deal with these injuries physically and mentally in a way that was ultimately, successful for you.
No, for sure. So towards probably the last 5 years, I got in a pretty good size. My last deployment to Afghanistan, I got in a good size roadside bomb, IED, and it rung my bell, got knocked out a little bit. And so when I got back from that deployment, I went to a program where they were at Bethesda Medical Hospital, right on the big medical hospital for the military on the East Coast. And they had a program where they were only really testing people that had been exposed to a lot of blast. It's called NICO. It's the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. And so while I was there, what they do is they kind of scan your whole body. The MRI machine is turned up higher than anywhere else in the U.S., so they can find all kinds of dots and black spots all over the place. And so you go through that, and they really just take care of like looking at your whole body and kind of look at all the injuries you have, both physical and mental. And then at the end, you're not healed. You're just like, hey, here's all these different things you can do for therapy that might help, whether it's art therapy, a music therapy, talk therapy, if you're going to talk with a therapist, group therapy, all these different types of things. They would even bring your family out and because a lot of us have trouble reintegrating with your family, and they'd host meals so you could all be together. So anyways, when I finished that and I came back, I was like, okay, I got this list of things that I need to work on. Yeah. And it really kind of helped me. And what helped me the most, honestly, was looking for other ways to volunteer. Like I liked volunteering. I like helping other people. And so I started volunteering with a surf clinic that was run by the Naval Hospital. And so that's where I,
Were you in San Diego at this point? Sorry?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky. I was in San Diego my whole time.
Okay.
But yeah, I started volunteering, and volunteering was key to me because it's just like something else we talked about in the beginning where you get to focus on surfing. This, I get to focus on somebody else. I don't have to worry about me. I can, share kind of what's happened to me, and then people feel comfortable, and then they can chat, and then we can just kind of move forward. And so volunteering, whether it's, with Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or surfing, that was incredibly impactful to me. And I was really excited because a dear friend of mine, Alex, who we served with years ago in the 90s, he was starting up One More Wave. And so that's kind of how I got involved with One More Wave.
Yeah. I just want to touch on something you said. And by the way, other Rob, feel free to jump in anytime. But I feel like, people, to be honest, talk a lot of shit about the military. But I feel like something that's really valuable that I've seen is like sort of and it doesn't always carry over, but sometimes like there's sort of this like collective like mindset of like doing things together that when you talked about like your experiences and like how like the volunteering, the sense of like, okay, this is, you're not focusing on yourself. Cause I think a lot of times we're just like, oh, if I just focus on myself, kind of harness the energy within. But what you're talking about is kind of sort of the opposite. It's like, oh, actually when you kind of, forget about how shitty things are inside for a minute and go outside and help people in the world, that's actually what ends up helping you also in the process. Like, do you feel like that's sort of that collective, like others-oriented mindset, like that you kind of had from your experience? Like, do you feel like that is kind of pushing against the more individualistic like sense that we get a lot of times in society? Like, do you kind of sense that tension?
I do, especially when you're talking about like post-traumatic stress. Like when you can share and then let someone else know, oh, it's okay to talk about it. I'm not going to be demeaned by it. I think that helped us all. I always tell people all the time, it's as much therapy for me as anybody else to get in and teach somebody or be in the water with them. It's pretty intimate, right? I got my hands on you. We're pushing you around. We're in the water. We're getting smacked, So anytime, I really think that, especially post-trauma, that you can kind of share and kind of hang out and just do something fun. And then holding each other accountable, like you talked about a little bit, that's key. And that's a big thing about keeping people from maybe doing something unhealthy, right? Always knowing that, I'm going to call you and be like, hey, what's up? Why aren't you here? What's going on? And all the excuses we can come up with for not going to the gym, for not doing whatever it is, you just need that one friend that's an asshole that goes, hey, let's go. And you will get off your ass and go. But you need to be shamed like that. We do. And sometimes we think that's not okay, but it's 100% okay.
Oh, we totally need to bring back like public shaming.
Especially your friends. It's like when your friend walks out with some wacky outfit. You're like, no. Yeah. Take the cowboy hats and the pink hat off. No, we're not doing that. Yeah. That's what we need for everything. Get out of the house.
Oh, yeah. Let's go. Like, I feel like there's like people talk about like, oh, like, like be who you are. Don't let anybody like, make you ashamed. But I feel like really like bring back shame. Bring back shame because like maybe bring back bowling, maybe don't. But bring back at least the sense in which people like have a sense of dignity. People have a sense of, hey, like I shouldn't appear in public this way, or I shouldn't be saying these things. Like seems like we sort of like de-emphasize that like culture. I don't know where it started or how to pinpoint exactly, but it seems like there's no sense of like public shame, like if you open your phone, scroll through Instagram a bit, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I don't know, either you guys, Rob, like, do you kind of get that sense from?
Hey, I'm an Italian from New Jersey. Like I run on guilt and shame. But I did find that in the military. And to Rob's point is, like, when you're in the military, you're always in a group of guys trying to achieve some goal, whatever it is, whether it's maintenance on some airplane or if it's, doing a raid or whatever it is. And, and so when you get out, you're just on your own, you're in the military, you kind of got somebody, at least telling you what is expected of you all the time, every day. Make sure your uniform's squared away. Make sure you shave this morning. Make sure you show up and you're staying in formation where you're supposed to be on time, and somebody's going to let you know what you're supposed to be doing that day. When you get out, there's nobody to tell you what to do. There's nobody that's got your back to let you know that maybe that's not such a great idea, or hey, this is how you go do a job interview or dress for success, or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's super important, and it's a weird thing to acclimatize to. When you get out, because you're just used to being around people all the time, and having to be, responsible to all these people around you. And most of that is through shame and guilt and giving each other a hard time, because that's what you do. And it's a bunch of 24-year-old guys for the most part.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, like, this thing of accountability, because this will transition to the next question. So basically, we've kind of talked about the concept of accountability, but just to spell that out, like, why is accountability so important, not only just in your time in service, but now with the other veterans that you connect with? Like, why does that actually save people's lives? Like, talk about, like, the importance of accountability.
Because it's giving you purpose, right?
Yeah.
You get that purpose back, and it's not just you.
Yeah.
You're responsible for. You're responsible for all your friends that are in your group. Maybe your group goes and surfs La Jolla Shores every Thursday morning. When Rob doesn't show up, we're going to make fun of him, and then we're going to go to his house and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that accountability is going to make Rob come, right? And so that way we can all check on each other. When Rob's having a bad day, we can be like, "Hey, dude, you all right? What's going on?" Oh, okay. Yeah, that's we can either engage, we can help, we can bring in our other field of friends to help. But if you never do that, you don't get that. So I think that accountability really lets us kind of keep the group together and not let the person go off and do something else. That they can go do their stuff, but, like, we're checking in all the time. And if you're not accountable to each other, and you should be intrusive to your friends, especially if you think they're having a hard time. Your friend's going through a divorce. Your friend's drinking too much. Your friend's got a bad boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. You should tell them.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be like, we don't hang out with Rob anymore. That new person he's hanging out, we don't like him. We should go tell him, hey, this person's stupid. They suck. They're not good for you. And that's what we need. Instead of like, I don't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah.
Fuck him. Let's go help him out. He's our friend. We need to bring him back home.
So, like, I mean, I guess for anyone listening to this who maybe is like a friend or family member or a relationship or whatever with a person who has served, and especially people who have been through traumatic experiences in combat or PTSD, what have you, like, what do you feel like are some of the right ways that you can talk to someone, like, from that perspective of the friend, of the concerned family member, to approach someone in a way that's respectful, sensitive, but also, like, to talk to them in a way that could end up saving their life? Like, what are some of the things people could say or steps they can take?
I think you just have to be direct. You cannot beat around the bush, because when you do that, then all of a sudden you're kind of worried about really your feelings, because you're uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And we're there to help the other person. So you have to think, like, how can I help this other person? And everyone's going to be different, right? But how can you get through to that particular person that's going to be impactful to them? And you have to, like, put your feelings aside, because it's going to be weird. And telling your friends you love them, that means a big deal. Maybe someone never got called. Calling your friend on a birthday. Like, most times when you're an adult, you don't care about that. But if you haven't been told happy birthday, a friend to do that. But I think just being utterly direct and being honest and, having those hard conversations is what we need. When you beat around the bush and then someone's like, and then you just kind of let it go like that, it really is not helpful, especially if you know that person's suffering. And we all have had friends like that, family members that are having a tough time, and we just kind of let them go. We're like, well, I don't want to get into it with Rob. He's going to be a pain in the ass.
That's a mistake.
And you feel guilty about it for not doing it. And so I think just being direct and being, like, honest with your friends and being in their business.
Did you subscribe yet? If you like our content, it's the easiest way to support the pod. Hit the subscribe button on the bottom right and keep it classy.
Yeah. And one more question along those lines is, like, whether you are a veteran and are helping other veterans as you are, or whether you're that concerned friend or family member, like, what are what are some tangible steps that we can take other than having those conversations? Like, what are some tangible steps we can take as individuals to make a difference for veterans around us in our lives and veterans in general who suffer from mental health, PTSD, suicidal ideation? Like, what can we do?
You go see those people in person. Don't just text them, because they'll just thumbs up you or something like that, or give you an emoji back. Go engage with them. Go knock on the door. Go say, hey, let's go have some coffee. Let's go grab a breakfast burrito. Let's go do something. Let's go make fun of those dogs at the dog park. Whatever it is, find whatever the thing is that person's into. Go to their house, knock on the door, and see their face. Pull them out of there, and then go do something like in person. Texting, messaging, sending them a reel. At night is funny, but it's not helpful at all. It doesn't connect anybody at all. You need to be like in person, put your hands on them. People think you care about them. They'll care about themselves.
I also wanted to ask, like, on the broader level, obviously, you're somebody who engages people like face to face, and that's how you do your work in one wave. But on a broader level, we talked earlier about the societal evolution of attitudes towards PTSD, towards veterans, towards issues of suicide. What are some practical, larger scale steps that you hope to see in your lifetime or in the future, that society takes, something tangible, that we can do as a society to improve it and turn this whole ship around? Because obviously, the numbers are what they are. I'm not going to dwell on that, but it's, we clearly need to do something. So what are some practical, larger scale steps that you would like to see taken?
I think what we're doing, just talking about trauma, talking about it's okay. You can have these events happen to you. You can have, PTSD, you can have traumatic brain injury, you can have depression, you can have anxiety. You can still be the same person. We can still go talk about it, encourage people to be okay with it. It doesn't mean you're a different person. It doesn't mean you can't be trusted with anything now. It just means that you've had this trauma. We're going to work on it. And the big thing about trauma is it's not I tell people all the time, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't go to the garage and just duct tape your leg. You would go to the hospital and get help. So when you see someone's having trouble or you're having trouble, you have to, enable yourself, allow yourself to go get help. And I think it's really hard for adults, especially males, to go ask for help. So I think just the more we talk about, the more we normalize that, you can have trauma, and you can come back from it. You can be fine. You can have a job. You can have a security clearance. You can do whatever you need to do and still have had this trauma and still move forward. It doesn't have to be the thing that defines you. Do what you're doing now. We're going to move on and find something else cool to do. Yeah.
So, moving forward, we've talked about some of the ways that we, again, individually and collectively help veterans, but talk a little bit about One More Wave again and some of the events that you guys have for veterans, some of the ways that you bring people together. You have some events coming up in a few days, but I think this episode will actually be released after that. But you guys do also have the competition, the World Para Surf Championship that's being hosted in Huntington Beach, right?
That's right.
And that's later this year in November. And talk about some of these upcoming events, and not just how the events are going to play out, but what it's really doing in terms of bringing people together.
No, for sure. So our primary mission, right, One More Wave, is providing injured and disabled veterans with custom surfing solutions.
Okay.
And so what that means is we're going to make a board or buy a board, whatever it is, for someone to suit what they need, depending on what their thing is. It could be they're missing parts. It could be they've got all their parts, but they just need a board. It doesn't matter. We're going to try to get them whatever that piece of gear is that allows them to ride the waves. Once we've got that, the next piece is community. And the reason for that is when we first started, probably the first 6, 8, 10 boards, we made these beautiful boards. We'd hand them to the person and be like, this is going to be great. You're going to be awesome. We thought that would be the ticket, and they're just going to grab it and go, and life's going to be amazing. But every single one of them was like, hey, when we go surfing. So we were like, okay, we got to start doing these meetups. So we started what you're talking about, where we have monthly meetups. And so we started calling them Third Saturdays. It's the third Saturday of every month. We meet. So in San Diego here, it's in Del Mar, but we have chapters in San Diego, Virginia Beach, North Carolina, South Carolina, a couple in Florida, Oahu, and Okinawa. Yeah. And so all we do at these meetups is just we meet for 3-4 hours, we put up a tent, we go surf. And at these events, we're not trying to do anything else. By that, I mean, it's really easy to go, hey, we could have a physical therapist there. There we could have yoga there. Hey, we could have sound, the bowls. We could have all these amazing other things, but it starts to turn into we're not surfing anymore. We're just trying to put all this stuff on. So we got rid of all that. Okay. We'll bring some coffee, unhealthy snacks, and we surf, right? And so that's it. And so we come to these events. If we're going to present gear like surfboards to people, we'll try and do it there so everyone can see it and get stoked. And then we just get in the water and surf. And there's not really a start and a stop, meaning we don't like start at a certain time, gather everyone up. I stand up,
go.
I put out word, and then everyone gets. We don't do any of that stuff. And we found that people liked it much better because people would skip certain parts because maybe there's one that's faith-based. And they're going to have a faith-based program first. People would skip the part they didn't want, or they're stretching. I hate yoga. I don't want to do yoga. So they'd skip that part. So we got rid of all that, and people love it. They just come whenever they want. It's open to everybody. It's not just veterans at all. Here in San Diego, it's probably 60% vets, and the rest are just people of the community that want to come hang out, surf. Could be active duty people or families, first responders. It doesn't matter. And so all those things we just meet and surf. We get in the water, hang out. We'll take pictures. And we'll do all the things we were talking about, talk some trash, encourage each other, check in with each other. You're there in person, so you can't skip out or just do a DM instead.
Sure, yeah.
And so we do those all over the place. They're all always the same day, always the same time. So you don't have to remember the actual date. But then another piece you talked about is the competition. And so the VA is big into competition for injured veterans as a way to kind of get back into society and have new purpose. And so Team USA has parasurfing. And so parasurfing are there's a bunch of different kind of variations of it. Maybe you lay down to surf, maybe you stand up, you have one leg, or you have one arm, or maybe you're blind. And so there's 4 athletes that are on Team USA that are all veterans, and they're all one more wave folks. And so they travel around. There's 2 different circuits where they get to compete on the world stage. And so it's fun to go around with all those folks and compete. And so it depends on what they need. So we talked about Jose in the beginning. Sure. Jose's a prone surfer, means he lays on his stomach. We made a special board for him where he holds the handle with one hand. He has no legs and he doesn't have another arm. And so for him to get out, someone pushes him out like a boogie board out through the waves, and then another guy's out there and he pushes him into waves. So it's a 3-person team. And so we rotate around pushing him into gigantic waves. And then we have people that are, paraplegic also that are competing. We got people that are amputees that are competing. And so those folks go all over the place. So, this last year we were in Australia, Oahu, Costa Rica, and then here in Oceanside. And now you're talking about Huntington will be another big one. But that'll be just another time for these athletes to get out there and, get barreled.
Yeah, no, I love it. I also want to say just like, I don't want to pass this over, this thought, because there's a lot of resources that are, in theory available out there for people who are suffering from mental health issues or for veterans. But I feel like it's different when it's like, okay, you have somebody who's a civilian who's working a job, they're helping these people, whether it's a therapist or a VA worker. But I feel like it's so different when veterans are helping veterans. There's just something about it. And I think what it is like the way you talk about it and like the seeming simplicity of just getting out there on the water is like, I can see it in your face. Like, you love these guys. You really do. And like that comes across in a way that I don't know if it would come across the same way from somebody who hadn't served. But yeah, I don't know if there's a question there, but it's just something I was thinking about. Like, there's a lot of complex solutions that we have to mental health issues, but like the way you talk about just getting out there on the water and, kind of leaving what's behind for now. Like, I think sometimes the simple things are the most beautiful, and that comes across. So I just wanted to point that out. But I guess that I wanted to also say, like, as far as like looking forward, like for One More Wave, beyond doing what you do, which is already changing and saving lives, as we've seen the stories. I've seen the stories online. I've heard from people who have been affected by what you're doing. But is there anything else that you're not doing now that you'd like to do, or something that you are doing now that you'd just like to see blow up? Like, and also like how can we get involved and how can we help with that kind of thing?
No, for sure. Just we like to keep opening. We call them chapters. So the more we can open, the more people we can affect. It's harder on the East Coast, right? We got it a lot easier out here to surf year round, but we're always trying to open new chapters because a new chapter opens up. We get more veterans in there, more people part of the group. It just makes it better. So doing that right now, we're super excited because the surf clinic that the hospital used to run was shut down during COVID and never started up again. They asked us to start it. So now One More Wave is running a surf clinic for Balboa Hospital. So we're taking out patients from the hospital right now to surf. Some of them never even seen the ocean. Yeah. So, or never been in the ocean. So we're taking people that are actually patients at the hospital out to learn to surf. And so they're getting a break from being in the military. So that's pretty cool. And then our other big things are just supporting the athletes, getting the people that would gain so much from competition. You know, people really like to get out and, you know, duke it out with other people, be a competitor, especially on the world stage. It's so cool to watch athletes competing and helping each other.
Yeah.
I don't know what sports you did when you were a kid. I'm sure you did something. But
I ran cross country, then I played rugby.
so when you go to the game, you're mean mugging the other team. You're kind of eyeballing them. Maybe you're shouldering them. That never happens at adaptive things. Like people will help each other get into waves before they'll bump them out of the way and do something weird. So it's an incredible community to be a part of. I'm blessed to be able to do it. Yeah,
that's awesome. And you know, as we just wrap up here, like I just want to say, like, you know, as I said, we've interviewed a few other veterans. I've talked to veterans about their experiences, but what you're doing and what you guys are doing, and I'm not just saying this to check the box, but it's really saving lives, and it's for me, and because of knowing people that have been affected by this, it means a lot. So just, I don't know how to say this, but thank you. Like, thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Know that, you know, there's a lot of people outside of just even the military community that are really, really supportive of this. And it's making a lot of people's hearts turn in a good direction. So keep doing what you're doing. And onemorewave.com is the website, right?
That's
and
right.
People can donate there.
They can donate right on the website.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you guys are on social media? Do you have like an Instagram or something?
Just one M Wave. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you guys are building surfboards all the time, right? You're building surfboards for veterans, and even surfboards, right, that are tailored towards veterans who have who've lost like limbs or who are suffering from different injuries. So I think that's really awesome. We talked before about for the podcast about how you're building a board for a friend of mine. So again, thank you for everything that you're doing. This has been really awesome. It's an honor to meet you and an honor to do this podcast. So
thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Rob. That's a wrap, guys. This has been another recorded episode of Stay Classy Podcast with your host, Steve Wire. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, you can find all of our content at our website at stayclassypod.com. And thanks to our production sponsor and partner, MaxLux Media. You can find them at maxluxmedia.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Every subscription helps and goes a long way towards ensuring that we can continue to produce content for viewers like yourself. Thanks so much. Stay classy.